Thank you very much for inviting me. The very great honor of addressing my friends and brothers and sisters in software in Europe and Germany. I'm sorry I'm an American. I am sure by the time we're done, you will be too. But, you know, it's interesting. I find that wherever I go, and I go a lot of places to give talks of this type, to China and points north and south all over, India. I go and I speak to the software developers, and wherever I go, yes, there are some cultural differences. But what is a greater and more interesting phenomenon is that those of us who are in the fraternity or brother and sisterhood of programming, those of us who have been touched by the power and beauty and glory of software, those of us like you and like me, we are post-national. We belong and live in a culture that transcends nation states. We are brothers and sisters in the software nation. And so, though I'm an American, I feel as one with you in my citizenship in that state. How many of you love computer programming? What are the rest of you doing here? In 1976, when I got my first little computer and I started to program in BASIC, you know, for x equals 1 to 10, hello, Jim, next x. It was as if I was struck by the lightning of reason, and all of my destiny and purpose became manifest in the sensations that I experienced when I learned to program. How many of you have been similarly transformed by learning to program? Where your mind starts to work differently and your passion is engaged on the prospect of reason. I mean, when you program that computer, I went into a room to learn to program that computer that I bought at a little Radio Shack outlet, and I bought it for $499, and I learned to program it in that room, and I never have come out of that room. I have been in that room learning to program that computer for all of my life since that moment. Because it was surpassingly beautiful to think that something could be ordered in this world, that something could be more or less logically and mechanically perfect. That was pretty cool and quite a promise, is it not? That we could create something that actually works, like the internet. The internet basically works. TCP/IP is a protocol that connects every person or machine that has an address and that wants to connect, and it just kind of works. That's quite a promise. And I see that not as the destination of this software, not as the end of the road, but as a way station and as an example to us of how it could be among people on Earth, of how we could connect and interact. Now, I didn't have such grandiose visions when I started to program, but I sure felt the power of the whole thing. I sure saw the beauty of it in the Apple IIe and the TRS-80, the Commodore PET, and then later in the Atari, and then finally in the IBM PC, and in everything since then. That it's always been the stuff that was beautiful and programmable that really triumphed. Of course, when you write a program, pretty soon you get to where you see that you can't do it alone, that the programs you want to create are much more complicated and much more broader in scope, and you have to work with a team. And things get a little difficult at that point. Have you noticed that? A little less promising, a little less simple. What is surpassingly clear to you becomes quite a complicated endeavor to communicate with other people. And I never saw this, but so vividly when I was hired into Microsoft in 1992, and we had a team that was well behind in its marketplace and was being kind of savaged by the company named Borland. And they had lost 20 or 30 market share points over several years. And they'd been 2 years, 3 years without a product release because they just could not get it done. And there were 200 of the most brilliant people ever that I thought. And most of them were long since multimillionaires, and they were only working for the joy of it. But it wasn't joyful anymore. They were losing terrible. They were the laughing stocks of the company. Some magic took place on that team at one point, at one magical moment, when we were in a room together like this, and it occurred to me that unless I led them somewhere, I was going to get fired just like the guy I had replaced. And we had to succeed. And so I asked them, did you want to win? You know, were you serious about it? Can you get your head in the game with me? Are you sick and tired of looking like fools? And yes, we are. Well, let's win. Yeah, everybody shipped me 5 ideas by the end of the day of how we can get a great product done by February 23rd of this year. And we'll go to that show and we'll launch that product and we'll win. And that product was Visual C++, and that team was the greatest team I've ever been on. And it was the same people who were losing and being idiots and scorn. My first email from Bill Gates was, "Dear Jim, you guys in the language businesses units are the stupidest people in this company. Welcome to Microsoft." It's such a very great honor to receive the mail, but maybe I'd have skipped, So the stupidest guys in the company all of a sudden are brilliant and unstoppable, and we go from shipping one world beater product, Visual C++ 1.0, and then we start shipping it anytime we wanted, and we realize, well, we can just ship as we wish. That was quite a realization. And we started shipping on a subscription, and we just hammered away at the competition and just kind of won. And you don't hear much about Borland anymore. And then that product went on to become a big part of Visual Studio, which I understand is the predominant environment that you people use. And it was a great team. How many of you have been on a great team? Quite a bit different than being on an ordinary team, isn't it? That's what I noticed, that the same people in the same environment with the same assignment can become a great team and nothing can stop them. We reduced our head count by 25%, no problem. We started 3 new businesses and divided up, no problem. There was nothing we couldn't do. There was nothing we couldn't do because we were a great team. And it struck me, boy, the difference between a great team and a struggling team, it isn't 2x. And I've asked this question of thousands of people since. What is the difference between being on a team that's in a state of shared vision like that magical state where they can do anything, versus an ordinary team? And I ask them to stand up, and I won't do it to you tonight or this morning, but I will tell you how it goes. And I go, being on a team in a state of shared vision is at least twice as good as being on one without one. Is that true? Yes. No one sits. I ask them to sit down if it's not true, and no one sits down. So there's a thing that they're 100% agreed on. It's at least twice as good. And how much time do we spend worrying about 5%, 10%, 15% better? It's at least twice as good. And then I go, is it 5 times as good? Yes, no one sits down. 5 times as good, 5 times better, whatever that means. So then I go, is it 10 times better? And I get a few people to sit down. And on average, and I've asked thousands and thousands of people this, on average, they think it's somewhere 8 times better, 10 times better. And then they start sitting down because it just becomes a ludicrous exercise. It's infinitely better. It's the difference between joy on the one hand and misery on the other. The difference between being on a team in a state of shared vision. And so, along about toward 1995, my wife, who was a program manager in our group, and I started thinking, we need to figure out how to get any team that wants to be in that state of being into that state of being. We need to figure that out because it's so much better that there's no comparison. We couldn't really figure that out in a big corporate environment where we were dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars at risk if we take any chances. And so we started a laboratory. We left Microsoft, started a laboratory where we could put in teams and give them an assignment and watch how they went about doing it and see if they couldn't demonstrate for us and find out and discover in and of themselves the principles that would always yield a team in a state of shared vision, or the practices. So for 17 years, that's what we've been doing. And it's recently, and I'll tell you what it is. I mean, I know how to get any team that wants to be in one to a state of shared vision, to that exalted state. And then they can go on and do great things. And we've done it repeatedly, and we've shown it, so that other people can do it. It's been science, right? It's been experimental. And repeatability has been our principal thing. And we're starting to see that if you use certain things, certain principles, the same principles you learned in software, and you apply them to human interaction, you can create mechanisms that are more or less perfect between and among the people. Communications protocols, interpersonal protocols, software for your head. And it's at this point in the story that I start to get the idea that software is big. Software is an impulse. It's an impulse that inhabited our ancestors in the 16th and 17th century when the age of reason came to be here in Europe. And it reached across the waters, and the age of reason, where all of a sudden the Enlightenment was lifting people out of the mire of the church state, theocracy that was enslaving them, basically, and had been since the fall of Rome. Enlightenment. The Enlightenment came, and with it, Isaac Newton and experimental science, I mean, Isaac Newton, I don't know what he thought of himself, but he was trying to turn, lead into gold, and he was keeping track of all that, and that didn't work, that didn't work, and that's kind of what we were doing in this lab, is like trying to turn the lead of human relations into the gold of shared being, what we call multi-personality or composite being, where all of the virtues of the people go into one pot, and where the IQ aggregates instead of the more typical nullification that we all suffer from. The Enlightenment finds its climactic moment in the birth of software. Software is just reason, is it not? And no wonder I was grabbed so hard by software. It is reason in action. And you and I are the people who practice this discipline of reason. We are the lords and ladies of logic. We are going to be held accountable for how we dispose of this treasure in our lifetimes. There's a reason also that we high-tech people in all the globe are the richest humanity has ever known. Reason in action creates untold wealth, unimaginable riches. And I knew that an important turning point had come when 6 months or a year ago, Apple Computer Corporation, which I had watched for many, many years, Apple Computer Corporation had more cash than the U.S. government. That's a freaking lot of cash. because the government can print as much as it wants. And Apple still beat them. That is untold wealth. That is a change, a big, enormous change. From Jefferson to Jobs. Jefferson, now 300 years into it, still suffering from the remnants of his legacy of slavery, still suffering and weak, falls over and hands the baton of civilized reason, the baton of truth and reason, freedom from tyranny and despots and religious tyrants, hands that baton to Jobs, to you, and to me. There was a time when democracy was the edge of goodness, was the edge of civilizing impulse, was the edge. That was the time of Jefferson, and that was the time of the compatriots in Europe who overthrew at great personal cost the tyranny that had for so long enslaved them and gave us the opportunity and the freedom to embrace this latest embodiment of the same force that drove them to such acts of courage and leadership. Reason. The age of reason was now reaching its exciting climax. Moreover, software, which we may think of as the god or goddess of reason, is, when executed well, a money machine. It's just, I've already said what kind of extent we're looking at. And for the first time, doing good pays cash. This is a pretty remarkable phenomenon, because I'm meanwhile looking in the lab and trying to see, well, what works, what makes a team great, because anything that makes it great, we're going to put it in the next week's course and start with that, right? Any practice or idea that, anything we need, anything at all. I don't care if it was good or bad or whether it was greed-based or whatever. I just wanted results and effective human behavior to create brilliant reasoning programs. Beautiful ones, great ones. And everything that we found, everything that we uncovered and discovered, when we stripped it right down, if those people loved each other, they would produce great results. And that's fortunate, because I would have gone whatever which way. But it turns out that all the pursuit of virtue is what motivates individuals, and making a positive difference in the world is what motivates and empowers a team. Creating things of beauty together. And to do that, they had to know and disclose to each other what they want, what they feel, and what they think. Now, we shouldn't get too excited about the human capacity to think. It's really not that big, and it's certainly not dominant in our lives. I don't know about you, but I don't really think very often. Most of the time, I'm just sort of feeling and looking around for food and sex and thinking about what's next for me and being kind of egocentric. I mean, isn't this mostly what your consciousness is all about? Or am I the only one? Am I the dark one among us? Yes, most of us are that way. But if we embrace the hacker ethos, which is the same ethos that Jefferson embraced, right? It's about freedom. that we're all free, that information is free, that individuals are valuable and free. If we embrace that ethos on a team or in a family and start to practice as if that were true, we will get better. In fact, we will get great results. So, watching these teams year after year in this team laboratory and also trying to take the stuff back and see if it works in a corporate environment where this stuff equals interpersonal protocols. You can go read about them. They're called the core protocols. They're kind of, you'll be very familiar. You'll see how they work. I mean, they're just code, but kind of for your head, right? Practices that will yield great teams, highly connected teams. There's a set of commitments that people have to make. And when they make those commitments, there's 11 of them. It's not very hard, and they're not very radical. They're hard to keep, but they're not hard to make. You know, things like, I commit to know and disclose what I want, think, and feel. I commit to support the best idea, regardless of its source. When a better idea comes along, and I become aware of it, I will state it, and then I will propose it for decisive acceptance or rejection by the rest of the team. Those are among the core commitments. I will not harm someone that follows these commitments. I will not do something dumb on purpose. How many of you do something dumb on purpose frequently? Like go to a meeting that you know has no value. Does anybody do that? Right. Just, okay. That's where we betray reason and accept the not. That's where we accept the negation of goodness. That's where we throw away our freedom, is when we do that. So we need to get together and support each other in not doing that. There's 11 commitments in this work, and this work I give away. So I mean, it's not like I'm going to try and sell you, but I wanted you to get a taste for what the future holds when reason bursts out of its narrow containment in software and becomes practice, universal practice throughout our software nation, say. I mean, as it is, we're creating culture all the time, right? The fact that I said the people in China recognize me as a brother in the software culture, something big is happening when I can go anywhere in the world, be sort of parochial and speak my English. Thank God that's coincidentally the language of technology as well, because everybody seeks to understand it that wants to program. And they embrace and are pursuing the same things that motivated you to begin with and possibly motivate you still. They are pursuing reason and triumph and beauty, and they love to program and be reasonable people. And they admire the same things you admire. They have the same values. They are a new post-national culture. And I get to do the closing keynote, and they told me, well, that's the one for blue skies. So I won't drop the ball on that account. Yes, the blue sky is that we have brothers and sisters all over the world that feel and think as we feel, and who are learning even as we are to collaborate as teams, because you can never produce something in software that's better than you are, than you, the team that makes it. Team, the fundamental equation of our work is team equals product. All the virtues and vices of the team are in the product, and vice versa. You can see everything you need to know about the team by looking at the product. But in no case is it ever better than the effective aggregate virtue. By virtue, I mean IQ, courage, virtue, the goodnesses of the team. That's going to always equal the product. "11 commitments. And then there's these 11 protocols. Now, these didn't start out as protocols, and the commitments didn't start. They just started out as we noticed that what worked included these behaviors. And so we wrote basically notes of what worked. Here's what works. It works, for example, if humans articulate their emotions at work. Right now, it's prohibited. Emotions are taboo. And since mostly what we do very well is feel, this causes difficulties for us if our emotions have to be left at work. I can remember going to Japan and saying, our protocol recognizes 4 feelings, just as the basic primitive feelings of human feeling: mad, sad, glad, and afraid. Right? So that's what we say. I explained that to a guy in Japan one time. He goes, "Oh, in Japan we only have 2 feelings." And I go, "Really? Well, what are they?" And he goes, "Happy, not happy." And I said, "Well, what about surprise?" Because, have you ever given the Japanese guy your card? And you go, "Oh, surprise." Contains a lot of their emotions. But in any case, we recognize 4 feelings. And those are the 4 feelings that you disclose, right? When you're feeling mad or glad, whatever. So if you're disclosing feelings and your brain's telling you you're feeling those things, you are acting like an integrated human being. The secret to maturity that we've noticed is people that can think and feel simultaneously, they pass some sort of developmental hurdle. They are considered mature. Now, these protocols consist of things like checking in with your feelings and deciding things as a team. Now, this is where a lot of people get in trouble. Our political system is based on radical freedom and radical democracy. Radical, like unanimity. Now, that's democracy, right? Where everybody agrees before you act. Everybody. And anybody voting no stops the whole show. So our decision-making system for a team, for what we call a booted team, a team that's running those commitments, is unanimity precedes action. Unanimity. When they were creating the American Constitution, which I consider kind of a big development in human governance, they locked themselves in a room, these 50 or 60 people, and they locked themselves in there and they demanded of themselves unanimity, not majority rule. When you think about it, majority rule is kind of stupid, right? It says all we got to do is get to 51%, and then we can put all of us, including the 49% who don't want to, in charge of accomplishing it, whatever it is we want. So we take our outliers with us and put them on the front lines right next to us. It's not really very smart. But if instead you force all the conflict to get resolved before you proceed, now that's smart. And surprisingly, unanimity on a team that's aligned around being effective humans, unanimity is easier and quicker than majority rule, and way better than the boss dictates. Now, I know we have several cultural hurdles to get over before teams are kind of allowed to exercise their own freedoms. But in effect, they exercise them anyway, whatever, If the boss says do something stupid, well, we just kind of executed poorly. And the results come back to them. If, on the other hand, we get aligned around something great and we do it, the rewards are just limitless. I mean, let's talk about Apple for a second, right? Okay, they had the iPod. That was a great product. That's got them going in this next wave. One great product. Now, let's define our terms a little bit. Good is the abundance of something desirable, right? You know, if you have something you want and there's a lot of it, that's good, right? Great is abundant goodness. So there's lots of things in good domains, right? There's many good things and a lot of them. That makes something great. Past great, abundant greatness. What if you had greatness on every corner, you know, greatness up and down the street? That would be magnificence. Magnificence is abundant greatness. And it's that prospect which we look at today as an industry and as a global society. So Apple has one great product, the iPod, and then that gives them iTunes, right? And so then they got that too, which is kind of really where the action is, and a little bit of control of the music industry because everybody loved the great iPod. The kids loved it, everybody loved it. Everybody had to have an iPod. Out of that trend came the iPhone. Now, the iPhone is a pretty magnificent thing. It's a great product. I think we have to agree. Coming out of, you know, where it came from, like sort of nowhere in a way, came out of the iPod. And I guess the BlackBerry and others that were moving in the smartphone direction. But the iPhone kind of took that touch screen, it took everything, and it became a great product. And that great product has generated all of that incredible wealth, overturned basically the computer order as we knew it then, and led to the creation of over 1 million, something like 1 million applications on the iPhone, or at least in the store. 1 million apps. I mean, that's almost inconceivable. As a guy that sold development tools, if there were 1 million apps in my world, man, that's the benefits of a common platform. You go from 20 apps on something to 1 million, and the whole world starts producing for this platform. It will be the same for human interaction once we get to a common platform for cultural innovation. See, like right now, in '95, we discovered all these principles of what made a software team work. I published a book on it, Dynamics of Software Development, and that kind of took off and changed the way people thought about software a little bit, made us more flexible. We really wanted to focus on the team. And it took about 5 or 7 years, and then Agile and stuff picked up on some of those ideas and went with it, extreme programming and so on. And they moved, and they became cultured, like canned cultures. Now, companies go, I want to be Agile. They go do these 10 things. Or I want to be Scrum. You know, they pick up these various practices that are more or less routinized and available to all. Agile and so on. Those are little canned cultures. Those are forerunners of what's next in cultural development. Forerunners. They're like back in 1976 when I picked up the PC and I looked around, I saw Wang word processors, various dedicated computers used for certain vertical applications that were very expensive. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember those things, but they all were forerunners of what would happen when the common platform took over, which it did. Right, with PC-DOS, there emerged a common platform for all the programming impulses of the world. And that created quite a legacy, and that's why we're all in this room together, actually. And it created all these programmers. Programmers are reasonable people. They're different than non-programmers. And so they create cultures, microcultures in their immediate vicinity, which produce more software. So software produces reasonable people, which produce more software. So good is aligned with greed to some extent. So these protocols have things like a decider. You get to vote, right? I propose, that begins the protocol, I propose that we do X. You get one actionable idea. 1, 2, 3, everybody votes. Yes, no, or yeah, I support it, but I have a bad attitude. That's how you get to unanimity. If you vote no, then the person who made the proposal talks to you and asks you the one question that would be useful to ask at that time, which is, what would it take to get you in? And you tell them. And if nothing would get you in, you have exercised your veto. If you exercise your veto, everybody on the team turns to you and says, oh, okay, you must have a better idea then. So you are now on hook for delivering a proposal that passes or at least gathers substantial votes. You don't get to just say no because you feel like saying no. You say no because you have a better idea. So it's this system of accountability that keeps things going and keeps things going in the correct direction. When you have unanimity, all of the thinking gets into the product before we start behaving. In any event, software has started to create these little cultures. Like, how many of you are exploring agile behavior for your development teams? Come on, let me see. Really, not many, huh? Okay, well, that's more than zero. What about Scrum? Yeah, okay, more. All right, so these are like little cultures, you know. They're basically packages of human behavior that you adopt. They're not necessarily very good platforms because they don't create add-ons and they don't interact with each other and version with each other and march out as, I mean, software is basically nothing but awareness of how to how to create and move good ideas, basically, and version them and improve them over time and so on, and keep the world syncopated on what's the latest thinking, basically. What's the latest thinking on word processing? That's what a word processor is, the latest thinking on word processing. So it's a common platform. And software is driving the whole globe toward a common platform for cultural innovation. And by cultural, I don't mean national. I mean local. Your team and your family. So as you go home, I want you to think about, as you end this conference, and perform your duties as a programmer or designer of programs in the world, I want you to think about your responsibility compared to people like Jefferson or whoever your personal symbols of reasonable, free life is. Behave like them because we're the ones who have that baton now. It's the programmers. And it's our tune and our duty to create and add to a common cultural platform that promotes the same ideas that were promoted in the 1700s by our ancestors. Freedom from tyranny. Freedom of information. Beauty and elegance in all things. And if we do value that, and if we do create a common platform, we will distribute knowledge in a way and with an effect that's never before been seen. 10x, that's what the promise is. Don't work on anything less than that from now on. Thank you so much for your kind attention. That is my message to you today.